GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network. The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This here is episode 149.
Episode 149, people. Yeah, we have entitled it, if you're looking on your podcast screen there, on whichever subscription platform you subscribe to. Yeah, whether it's Apple or YouTube, Odyssey, or any of that. Yeah, it says Stefon Diggs, ex-Buffalo Bills wide receiver. Yeah, unbelievable. Wow, Ryan, we're at that time. Yeah.
I mean, that takes the sting off, I would have to say. Starting off the podcast here, you all know by now, that's John. He's my
That's me. Hi, buddy.
Randy Macho Man Cimino.
Yeah.
I'm Ryan Wolfe.
From the space, yeah.
Oh, man. This was a podcast I never thought that we would have to do, but now that we're doing it, it unfortunately makes a lot of sense. Trust the Podcast can be heard on betterlivethandead.com, gearnetwork.com, wherever else you listen to your podcast. Make sure as well to hit that subscribe button as well to stay up to date on the latest podcast. We just popped out a new Better Live Than Dead podcast for the first time in what felt like
did. And it was, and may I say, it was terrific. It was
cathartic.
It was, you know what it was? It's great that we had that podcast, because a good talk radio podcast, like, you know, I feel like that's missing. I'm old. I'm old school, old generation. Like I like the talk podcasts like that. So to be able to bring that back under the BLTD banner, which is long standing, has been here since Gear, and then kind of recap the 10 years of Gear Radio Network, of which 9.89 of those years BLTD has been the large part of that. Was really cool to hear. So if you have that on your feed, take a listen if you have not already.
Yeah, I got a feeling we'll have more of those soon. I know, John, you and I were supposed to go to a baseball game this week, but it decided to rain and snow and be just generally cold out. So,
yeah. And that's my bad for like actually pulling the plug and purchasing those tickets, you know, in advance, like trusting Mother Nature, whom has been very drunk in recent months, especially here in Western New York. I don't know how it is for my Buffalo contingency. If you guys want, feel free to comment and let us know. Yeah, but I know here in Rochester, it was the warmest recorded winter on record. And so
I was told global warming is not real.
Well, yeah, global warming.
I hit your fart button right there.
Eyes of the beholder. I could do that. There you go.
Yeah,
we can't have that global warming. We still get snow.
How is it global warming if it's cold outside? You know, those conversations. But John, real quick, it's the same thing I did with the Sabres game with my brother back earlier this year. The weekend that Buffalo got like 7 feet of snow, ended up, missing out on that game. When I contacted SeatGeek, they ended up giving me a code to get my money back, so that way I can use the money I spent on other tickets. But they said to me, well, you can't drive there. I said, no, there's like 7 feet of snow. What do you want me to do? So,
right.
We all have good experiences with weather, so I just say we waited out a few more weeks. It should be nice, hopefully, knock on wood, and we'll be able to get that ball rolling. Yeah, no pun intended.
Absolutely.
But John, the previously unthinkable has happened. The Buffalo Bills on Wednesday, April 3rd, announced that they had completed a trade sending wide receiver Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans, along with their 2024 6th-round pick and 2025 5th-round pick for Houston's 2025 2nd-round pick via the Minnesota Vikings. Now, before we jump into our three big things and break this down, John, what were your immediate reactions when you saw this come across your feed?
My immediate reaction was, I guess I expected it, because that's kind of the where the league is headed, in that kind of direction, building around a young quarterback that you don't have to pay yet. And then, when if that quarterback turns out to be good enough and then you have to pay him, you start to see these kinds of things happen for those long established teams. I'm thinking of the Kansas City Chiefs here, obviously, when we're talking about the kind of the template for that, where they picked Patrick Mahomes, started him year 2, and built around him. And it just so happened Patrick Mahomes is a very, very good football player, and they had the ability for 3 or maybe 4 of those years, those early years before they paid him, to actually invest in name receiver, name this, build and pick all those pieces to win with that young quarterback around him. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes became as good as he is, and so now them paying him, that's when you see, a Tyreek Hill leaving, and those kinds of things happening, and then you get these plug and play pieces here, and I think we're at that point with Buffalo. This move here tells me, and I'll let you expand on it a little more when you go into it, but this move here tells me that the Buffalo Bills brass view Josh Allen in the same way and in the same light that Kansas City's brass viewed Patrick Mahomes. And I think we're now experiencing that here in Western New York because of how good Josh Allen is.
Well, your response was a lot more level-headed than mine was. I mean, I was in a meeting at work. Friend of the podcast, unpaid intern Chris Downey, called me twice. Mm-hmm. I ignored his first call, said, "Can I call you back?" He immediately called me again, and I'm like, okay, so something's going on. And then he texted me and said, "No, the Bills just traded Stefon Diggs." And I'm like, you could probably watch back at that meeting and watch the life just come out of my face, because my first response was, come on, man, what the fuck?
Yeah, I get that.
But those are the stages of grief, because now we're here on the podcast. I'm very calm, very cool, very collected. I treated the Stefon Diggs trade, John, the way I treat any Buffalo Bills game. Win, lose, draw. I mean, there's no draws in football. So win, lose, tie, I guess.
Sure.
I let myself kind of live in that moment for a little while. Mm-hmm. And then I start to kind of later that afternoon, that evening, start to read articles, start to look at Twitter, start to look at what other people are saying and how other people are feeling, and kind of let my thoughts develop from there, which is precisely what happened here. I mean, I don't want to sit here and act like it's a finely well-oiled machine. My brain is, the medication tries to help out with that. But having done this podcast 149 times, I'd like to think by now that we've kind of got a handle on how these things work. So my immediate reaction, yes, what is going on here, because knowing what the Bills have and where the Bills are going. But as you start to let it marinate a little, it starts to make a lot more sense. That's what we call the cliffhanger, John.
Absolutely.
Rolling us over to our 3 big things, brought to you by PuckLuck.com, your one-stop resource for all your National Hockey League sports betting action. PuckLuck provides win percentages and score projections for each and every National Hockey League game to tilt the ice in your favor. Not sure what to bet or just in a rut? Not to worry. PuckLuck also provides expert picks to get the puck bouncing your way. Please note, though, PuckLuck.com, no way affiliated with the National Hockey League, its teams, or the NHLPA. PuckLuck.com provides data related to gambling and cannot guarantee the success of any suggested or related wagers. As always, please gamble responsibly. Now, John, wrapping up the Stefon Diggs era, there's nobody in their right mind should be pissed about what Stefon Diggs did with the Buffalo Bills. In 4 years with this franchise, 66 games, he had 445 receptions on 644 targets, 5,372 yards and 37 touchdown catches. He rewrote the record books. He finishes his Bills tenure ranked 4th all-time in franchise history with those aforementioned 445 receptions, 4th all-time with those 5,372 receiving yards, and also 4th all-time in franchise history, those aforementioned 37 receiving touchdowns. Also, John, no big deal here. In his 4 years with Buffalo, Stefon Diggs led the entire National Football League with his 445 receptions. He was named an NFL first team and an NFL second team All-Pro throughout his tenure, while making the Pro Bowl through all 4 years with the Buffalo Bills. When all is said and done, the Bills paid Diggs $78.9 million over 4 years with the team in Western New York. I would have to say, worked out pretty well for the Bills, worked out pretty well for Diggs. But again, We'll talk more about it when we break the trade down in the next of the three big things. But really,
Yep.
this reminds you at the end of the day that football, much like sports, much like really everything in life, comes down to the money. It's a business, and a business decision was made on April 3rd to make this move.
Absolutely. It was made. And again, I don't think that if Josh Allen wasn't Josh Allen, right? If he wasn't top 3 in the NFL, I don't think we'd have this conversation, at least this year. I think they would have kept him and kept Diggs, but you figure out, you factor a lot of the things, and sure, the historical over the 4 years, you cannot take that away. You cannot take away the magic that Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs created together and what they did together to help not only uplift this team, but make them a bona fide perennial championship contending team. You can't take that away from them at all. But in the same, you look at Steph Diggs and you look at, okay, he's hitting age 30, or is age 30 now, one of the two, right? Usually that's kind of the plateau, 30, 31, 32-ish, if you're lucky, as a wide receiver before you start going the Odell Beckham route, which is one team here as a loner, picked up midway through the season, still good enough to help here in the slot kind of things, right? And Diggs is getting to that point where he's getting to that age where, there may be better options and much cheaper options. When we talk about the wide receivers in this draft, this upcoming draft right now, it's very deep. Everybody talks about Marvin Harrison and the other guy, I can't remember who, but it's a very, very deep draft. There's a lot of people
about those guys. Yeah.
There are going to be a lot of people in this draft, even in rounds 3 and 4, that are going to make some differences, especially with a little time. So it's a very receiver heavy draft. I think Buffalo believes in not only their system of coaching, which you can make all the Al Qaeda jokes aside or whatever. These boys clearly still play for Sean McDermott, right? So
we'll never forget that they can certainly develop some pass catchers,
right? So I think between that, you got an absolute hoss in Dalton Kincaid, right? And you have Josh Allen, who's rewriting record books on the week as far as Buffalo is concerned, and they built that around him. They trust him enough to help develop the pass receivers, and it's like the old adage says: if you have a good quarterback, you're going to have good receivers regardless.
Yeah, I mean, in looking at
we're in that direction, and why it's I think the sting that you had and that Downey had and that some of the Bills fans had too is because this is the first instance that we're seeing what happens to the other teams with the other all-time greats, right?
It happens with any team. I mean, it's happened.
Yep, Cincinnati's going to be next with it.
Yeah, the first thing I thought of was the Patriots with Tom Brady and all of the years where he was playing with guys they picked up from Home Depot and Lowe's,
right?
That were tossing lumber into people's trucks. And like, you look like you could catch a football. Obviously joking, but like that's how it was for the longest time. It was, hey, we're going to ask you to make chicken salad out of chicken shit, essentially. But I mean, I'm not sitting here telling you that Josh Allen is Tom Brady because that's asinine, but that's kind of the first thing I thought of. And it's really what Kansas City's had to do too, specifically, as you mentioned, John, because of financial reasons. What do you have to pay a quarterback a certain amount of money because the league dictates that, because that's how the way the league is gone. You have one of those players whom you can pay that money. Now at this point in time, first off, I'm going to roll over to our second of the three big things because obviously we're now working on breaking down the trade. We know that Stefon Diggs' presence in the lineup played a big role in the development of Josh Allen. I mean, for Christ's sake, when Josh Allen came into the league, his number one wide receiver was Kelvin Benjamin, and that was a complete disaster.
Oh yeah, that's a name I forgot. Holy crap, I forgot he was a Bill.
Yeah, that's a deep dive right there. But
that will tell you exactly how far along this team has come, though, and the impact that a Steph Diggs made to this team. So I really hope, for all of the isms that the Bills Mafia, has and displays at times, I really hope that they give Steph his flowers for what he did when he was here. And also, incidentally, Ryan, I think it was at the season finale, I had mentioned that I was likely going to buy a Steph Diggs jersey.
Well, now you
because
can.
he's one of, I can buy an authentic Bills Steph Diggs jersey at Temu jersey prices right now because of that. But I will have you know that as recently as 3 weeks ago, it was in my cart and I was going to check out and have my Steph Diggs jersey for the season. And something inside of me told me not to do it. Just hold off a little bit. And so I ended up buying CBD gummies with it instead. But I'm glad I didn't. Holy hell.
I mean, a friend of mine, Shenny, he reached out to me back on the 15th of March asking me about Stefon Diggs. And I was like,
that's a name out of the past. How's he doing?
I'll doubt it happen. This is exactly what I said on March 15th. I'll doubt it'll happen. Diggs still costs too much for Buffalo to move him, even if they wanted to.
Yeah, well they
don't I suck at my job, ladies.
Don't you feel like a big stupid dummy? I'll tell you what, though, there's a lot to unravel with this. So I was talking about going into the second of the three big things, breaking down the trade, because there's some very important pieces to this puzzle here, particularly on the Houston side and what they did with 3 of those years. But
thank you, John. I appreciate that. We're trying not to talk over each other. We're very excited about this because, again, breaking down the fourth wall, myself and John, we're probably not going to get back to everybody until after the draft. Maybe give it a week or two, let the dust kind of settle. Does Buffalo make any moves after the draft? Because obviously there's free agency. There's like the second wave of free agency. There's the draft. And then there's kind of like a small little mini wave, I guess, where right before mini camps, players start to sign. So kind of around then we would get back together, maybe do a podcast in person again. But we're here now talking about this. So breaking down the trade, John, there was writing on the wall. Really, once Ken Dorsey was fired and Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, the temporary, what's the word? Interim. That's the word. Thank you. His playing time decreased and subsequent production decreased as the season wore on. It almost seems like Buffalo was hell-bent on showing Diggs in the league they could win without him and be effective without him.
I don't know that that's the case, though. And I've heard that argument, and I'll see that, and I'll raise everybody. Well, they let James cook, literally.
Well, here's the thing, John. Here's the thing that I was going to say.
The running game, too. Go ahead.
Here's the thing I was going to say. The Bills were 6-1 in those games. The only loss coming to the Philadelphia Eagles in overtime in a game that they probably should have and could have won, or could have and should have won.
Sure.
But it's not something that is sustainable over a 17-game schedule, an 18-week season plus the postseason. So clearly, like, they were trying to prove something. There have been rumblings of, did Diggs pull himself out? Was Diggs 100%? Blah, 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 blah. That's all conjecture. You all can have that. I'm just putting this out there saying, judging based off of the playing time, combined with the fact of what did his statistics look like before and after, it clearly looks to me like they were trying to prove a point, whether it was to themselves or to someone else or whatever. The point, they got their point across, because clearly, John, you remember the second half of last season, we were talking a lot about what is wrong with Stefon Diggs? Is he okay? Blah, 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 etc.
Yeah, I remember that. And I won't discredit that, analysis on them saying like they're trying to prove that they can win without him. I mean, there has to have been some underlying, piece to that puzzle, right? But I don't think that it was 100% deliberate. Like, screw you, Steph Diggs. We heard about what you said about this, or your attitude during that one playoff game, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think it's just the way that the cookie crumbled when that offensive regime switched. Again, it's to your earlier point, the football's a business, man. And when they made a business decision to get rid of Ken Dorsey and they installed Joe Brady, and Joe Brady has his own plan. He had his own things, and that became his job. That became his role, and that became his offense to manage. And his offense relied a little bit more on the run than Dorsey's did. So I'm more inclined to believe that is the majority of the reason. And sure, there's a minority part of it that may say, yeah, they might have been letting Diggs know, who it is. But at the end of the day, they were winning. They were running the ball. They were letting James cook. It was alleviating pressure off of Josh Allen. Dalton Kincaid came into his own. Shakir Shakir.
Khalil Shakir played
Khalil
well. Yep.
Shakir, right? Yep, he started coming into his own, and I think right there, that's the manifestation of this system that they put into place, that they can develop very well these position players, so they don't need to be spending the $73 million anymore on a name like Steph Diggs, because they have a Josh Allen that can elevate anybody in that position.
Well, and that brings me to my next point here, the frustration boiling over. I mean, we've known since Stefon Diggs has been with the Buffalo Bills, there have been things that he has done either out in public or behind the scenes that have reportedly rubbed the Bills the wrong way. And the Athletic's Tim Graham, who I would have to say usually is not wrong, reported that, quote, the Bills' patience wore thin with Stefon Diggs. Now he's gone. We know Diggs often plays coy on social media. He likes to post a lot of cryptic messages that are normally brushed off, again, conjecture. But his most recent response to a following question had many raising their eyebrows. Quote, does Josh benefit from having a top-tier receiver? Yes. Is he essential to his success? No. Diggs responded with, you sure? Question mark.
I did see that, and I think that's more, him just being a salty cuck there than anything else.
Look, happens. If it happens once, it's an accident. If it happens twice, hey, there's, something going on there. Diggs responded with, you sure? 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later, he was no longer a Buffalo Bill. Now, GM Brandon Beane declined to confirm or deny a potential Diggs trade request when speaking to the media, but that the, quote, decision was made in the best interest of the Bills moving forward. He said, quote, are we better today? Probably not. It's a work in progress. Beane did go on to say, I would hope that people know I'm competitive as hell and we're going to work through this. Also, Pro Football Talk reported, Mike Florio reported that the Bills actually, again, reportedly, gave Stefon Diggs the okay to seek a trade to anybody in the National Football League aside from the Kansas City Chiefs for understandable reasons.
Sure.
But for the Buffalo Bills, John, this also is just another big step in the direction of this is Josh Allen's team moving forward. The Buffalo Bills have moved on from a laundry list of very big names this offseason that helped them win the AFC East 4 years in a row. You've got Mitch Morse, you've got Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Stefon Diggs, just to name a few, where it's like, these are the guys, Tyrell Dodson as well, going to the Seahawks. These are guys that the Bills would normally build around, but at some point in time, you have to say, look, the Bills seem to be saying, hey, we can take a step back, but we're still going to be good because Josh Allen's under center. And while you may not get a Stefon Diggs playing wide receiver one, you've got Josh Allen. You've got the addition of James Cook, who looked really good last year again. Khalil Shakir, who took a step. Dalton Kincaid, who looks like he's going to be a stud. A healthy Dawson Knox. You've got an improved offensive line. You've got
and you mentioned all those names too. You've mentioned all those names too. The one important thing to mention as well, a full off season underneath that Joe Brady offensive coordinating scheme that all of those names did so well with in the home stretch of that of the end of last season too. Now they've got that fluidity going, that continuity going. It's only going to get, to me, it's only going to get better. And again, I love Steph Diggs. I'm a big Steph Diggs fan. I hope he does really well in Houston, unless he's playing Buffalo or the Jets. Other than that, I hope he does really well. The man deserves his flowers, but in the same, I don't think it's going to be as big of a blow to, I think, the other offseason subtractions for Buffalo, namely on the defense. That's probably going to be the biggest hindrance. I don't think offense is going to be Buffalo's problem this year.
So looking at these interesting developments as well before we jump into the Bills side of things, after acquiring Stefon Diggs, the Houston Texans voided the final 3 years of his current contract, effectively turning Diggs' 2024 contract into a one-year, $22.52 million deal, making him an unrestricted free agent after this season. So essentially, Houston gets Diggs for one season. They get 2 late-round picks. Buffalo gets a second pick and future cap relief. So when you put it into that perspective, John, the business decision becomes much more logical because, again,
sure, yeah.
Excuse me. The last of the tabs here on the second of the 3 big things. Football being a business, first off, obviously, people are worried about what does Josh Allen think about this, which Brandon Beane said, quote, I did alert Allen, and there have been some inquiries, and it wasn't 100% off the table. Josh and I have a pretty regular conversation on things. I think it's important for me to make sure if I think something could happen to make sure, he's not blindsided, which, again, that is what you want to hear, because obviously when you trade a Stefon Diggs away, that's not going to be a very popular move in the locker room. But
Right.
if you have your team sold on your vision and the direction you're going, and you also seem to have a team that's won 4 consecutive AFC East titles in a couple of those seasons, has been very close to the Super Bowl, to a Super Bowl appearance at least. You tend to kind of lean in that direction of, hey, look, at this really sucks, this really hurts, but they've got a plan. And again, this move has been labeled by many across the league as a soft reset. Buffalo had the option to run this move to a post June 1st designation, which would have spread the cap out over 2 years, but Buffalo chose to take the full hit in year one. Trading Diggs means that the dead cap hit will rise to $31.096 million, which is the largest for a wide receiver in any season. But John,
Wow,
this is the perspective. This is where it's where you are choosing to display a specific narrative. I did mention $31.096 million. Buffalo was already on the hook for a cap of $27.854 million. So essentially, they're taking a $3.2 million loss this year to trade Stefon Diggs. $18.5 million in cash to Diggs comes off the cash portion of the books. The cap hit stays. So again, this is a cash saving move, not a cap saving move.
Okay.
But then with that, on top of that thought, you pay $3.2 million. You lose that in the cap. So you lose $3.2 million in cap. You gain $18.5 million cash. And then in 2025, $27.3 million in cap room opens up for the Buffalo Bills, allowing the Bills to be more aggressive in 2025.
Okay.
Also,
I mean,
for
that's
those
a
people,
nice strategy.
Yeah, and for those people who are worried that the Bills may not have a ton of cap room right now, they still do get that $10.2 million of more room on June 2nd. Once Trey White's post-June 1st designation processes. I know he's already a member of the Los Angeles Rams, but that's just how it works. June 2nd, the Bills get that cap space back, and then maybe they're in the market for someone else, or they just sit on the money and wait. But again, when you start to peel back the feelings, when you start to peel back the on-field aspect of it, and you look at it and you go, business-wise,
absolutely,
how does this make sense? This was not a hey, we don't like this guy, we're sick of his shit, let's get rid of him. This was hey, look at, are we better off without him? Probably not. But having the 3 years on this contract right now, you're looking at a 35-year-old wide receiver who's clearly, according to the Bills, again, he's probably going to be a wide receiver 3 in Houston. Let's just be honest right now. And that works for them. That works for him.
2.
Well, here's the thing. No matter what, not being a 1, that's up for argument. But not being a 1 will benefit Houston, and it will benefit Stefon Diggs. It takes pressure off of him, and he's, if he can still get open, great, awesome.
Right. This tells me that Houston is doing what Buffalo for CJ Stroud, what Buffalo essentially did for Josh Allen, and what Kansas City did essentially for Patrick Mahomes, et cetera, et cetera. So this to me, while this may be the end of that particular building block era for the Buffalo Bills, it appears that one is beginning in Houston because of this.
And that's how the league is progressing. So in the National Football League, you have, when you draft a rookie quarterback, for those who have not paid attention, I'll just break it down real quick for you. You get a 5-year window where you have a cost-controlled quarterback before you have to pay them. So in those 5 years, you want to go for it as hard as you possibly can, do as much as you possibly can. After that 5th year, when that new contract starts to toll, that's when it starts to get a little tighter on the collar, which is what we're seeing with the Buffalo Bills. That's where the drafting and developing comes into perspective. That's where hey, let's go out and get a veteran on a cheap deal, like Lyle Collins. He's going to be a swing tackle, which, again, kind of crazy to think that, but like, you can go out and pick up a veteran like that who is trustworthy, respectable, a decent football player on a 1-year deal or a small deal, to make it fit within the realm of the cap hit. So at the end of the day, yes, you're going to have to build your team around Josh Allen's cap hit. But again, smart GMs like Brandon Beane are able to do that. Smart GMs like the one in Kansas City, how Cincinnati's going to have to do it soon, Again, how Brandon Beane has done it, how they're doing it in Philadelphia. Like that is the reason why teams like that continue to be good annually, because they are able to work with the salary cap, work within the constraints of the salary cap, but also be incredibly creative, where you see Brandon Beane having these deals with, hey, we're going to extend this guy. We're going to put a bunch of dead cap at the end of it. And we're going to be able to maneuver here, there, everywhere, but we got to do this, then this, that. And you're like, wow, my head is spinning, but somehow at the end of the day, it works out. So yes, grand scheme of things, wrapping up the Stefon Diggs part of this, the Buffalo Bills are not a better team today because they traded Stefon Diggs. Will they be a better team because they traded Stefon Diggs? They believe so. And that's the vision that the team has to buy into. The fans don't have to buy into it because, again, it's emotion. It's fandom. It's, hey, there are some people who are just completely off the rails and can't understand it. But when the Bills come play in September, they're going to live and die by each snap of the football. And that's totally fine. I'm choosing to take a step back mostly because I'm a sane human being and I have, a daughter on the way, another daughter. I've got a lot of time. Work is really busy. Life is really busy. I don't have time to be mad about Stefon Diggs being traded, aside from the day that it happened. And I'm like, well, damn, this sucks.
It's the initial shock. And
yeah.
And I think when the news happened again, for me, I was like, my jaw dropped because I was like, wow. But it was only because I wasn't expecting it to happen this year. If anything, I was expecting it to happen next year.
Well, and here's the thing, John. The other thought that I had was obviously my initial reaction, which, if I remembered correctly and went back to bleep it out, I try not to swear. If I know I'm going to be very specific about it, I'll try to bleep it out. If it just slips out, I keep it, because it's human. It's cute. It's adorable. It makes people feel like they, I don't know, whatever. But exactly. After the trade and after I process a little bit, chatting with a couple friends, my first thought was, well, what does Brandon Beane have up his sleeve now? Because again, John, they're not going to try. I shouldn't say this way. I can't imagine. I don't want to say that they won't. I can't imagine the Buffalo Bills are going to trot out a wide receiver core where Curtis Samuel is your one, Khalil Shakir is your two, I don't know is your three, and then you've got Knox and Kincaid. I can't imagine that is going to be a set lineup. If anything, you're going to bring in a one or someone you believe. Maybe Curtis Samuel is your one to start the season, but you go out and draft a young guy, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Maybe you go draft a young wide receiver and you build him up to be a one, so Curtis Samuel can be your two. Whatever.
Indeed.
This is not set. The Bills are not playing tomorrow. The Bills are playing in 4.5 months from now. So again, there's a lot of time. Be patient, because again, if nothing else, John, what has this Bills organization done over the past 4 to 5 years?
They've rebuilt. They've coached up and they've developed just about every position player imaginable on their team. They're good in baseball terminology. They're their own good farm system.
Well, let's put it this way. I'll just put a bow on it for you. They've won. I mean, granted, this core had to go at some point in time because whether it's age, ineffectiveness, money, or they just find better players. This core that won the 4 AFC East titles had to go at some point in time.
Right.
All good things in sports must come to an end. That's just the truth. That's the business aspect of the game. But when you look at it, okay, well, in that core, yeah, they didn't win a Super Bowl. Yeah, they didn't get to a Super Bowl, but they've been a pretty damn good franchise over this last 4 to 5 years to prove to the fan base that, hey, look, if anybody in this area deserves the benefit of the doubt, it's Brandon Beane.
Absolutely.
I mean, we
he's earned it.
We talked about Sean McDermott here and there doing dumb shit. Hey, what about all the good things the terrorists did? We've talked about that a lot on this podcast, but there's one thing that Brandon Beane deserves. It's the benefit of the doubt, because again, at the end of the day, to be very to darken and be a realist here, none of this matters, and we're all going to die someday. So would you rather spend your time being mad at Brandon Beane for trading Stefon Diggs, or would you just rather give the guy the benefit of the doubt?
I'm going to acknowledge Brandon Beane as the tribal chief of the Buffalo Bills and refer to him as a dog.
I love that. I'm a big fan of that in the thought of WrestleMania. John, I want to just to wrap up here. I want to run over to the third of the three big things: replenishing the wide receiver room. Do you want to hit the ad, or do you want me to hit the ad?
Well, let's actually go to an actual commercial break because I think we're over that 30 minutes.
I thought we were close. I thought we were pretty close.
Yeah, we're gonna be over that 30 minutes. So let's hit an actual commercial break, and then I don't know if I'll hit the ad or maybe Randy Savage will hit the ad. But on the other side of these messages, you'll find out.
And we're back here on Trust the Podcast, wrapping things up here, replenishing the wide receiver room. This one's going to be real quick here, but we want to at least throw a few names out to every single person. So that way you can kind of see who to pay attention to, what names may pop up, and you can go, oh, yeah, Ryan and John told me about those guys. So,
and not only can you do that, you can also go frost yourself. Because replenishing the wide receiver room is brought to you by Go Frost Yourself, located in Rochester, New York. Go Frost Yourself does what other local bakeries do not. They bake from scratch, creating recipes themselves and using the best fresh ingredients that they can find to create delicious flavors for customers daily. Molly and Jen. Hi, Molly. Hi, Jen. Molly, incidentally, you are glowing, girl. I'm very, very happy for you. They have worked tirelessly to create what Go Frost Yourself has become today, and their passion can be tasted in the items that they bake. When you find yourself looking for an item for a special occasion, or maybe you want to try their incredible cinnamon rolls, if you are local, visit Go Frost Yourself's storefront in Greece at 2544 Ridgeway Avenue or at gofrostyourself.com.
I appreciate that, man. Looking here at the free agent market, there are a handful of names that are very familiar here.
Mm-hmm. I know I mentioned one of them earlier.
Odell Beckham Jr.
Yep.
Tyler Boyd, Michael Gallup, Hunter Renfrow.
What?
Michael Thomas.
What?
There's a reason why these names are on the free agent market, whether it is old age, ineffectiveness, injury history, or they just want a lot of money.
I'm calling my shot. I'm betting Odell Beckham comes to Buffalo.
Well, I would think Odell Beckham, like, here's the thing. Odell Beckham, it's a downgrade because I don't think Odell Beckham is at the point of Stefon Diggs, but
yes.
But he demands respect on a defense. And excuse me, that's kind of what you need right now.
Right.
Tyler Boyd reportedly wants to get paid, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. Michael Gallup was cut by the Dallas Cowboys, but you may be able to get him in for cheap. Hunter Renfrow, John, is my dark horse to be a Buffalo Bill. One reason.
Why is that?
Well, two reasons. He's fast and he's white.
Oh. Wait. So what does the last part have to do with any of that?
I just feel like Sean McDermott likes white wide receivers, and that would be a good fit. I don't have any other reasoning beside that. Just I feel like Hunter Renfrow and Sean McDermott may be tight, you know?
Maybe, but I'm going to say I'm fancying because Buffalo likes them their attention. It would not surprise me if Odell Beckham, if he's not signed by the start of the season, is a midseason pickup. But I'm looking on this list. Michael Gallup probably strikes me as the one that would probably be I don't necessarily want to say a game changer, but certainly would probably adapt to the playing style of Josh Allen a little bit quicker than maybe somebody else might, because he was playing in Dallas with Dak Prescott, who has a similar playing style, not exactly like Josh Allen, but he's got a similar playing style.
No, so don't put that on. Do not put that on Josh Allen, because you know what? Dak Prescott is and Josh Allen is not.
What's that?
An absolute choker, dog.
Well, okay, sure. I'm not talking about big game. I'm talking about normal. No, I'm talking about normal, like, game experiences here. The timing, the way Dak and Josh, will move in the pocket to expand the play and keep the play going. Gallup's already in that, is already used to that. So he'd know where to go, what to do, how to do it. I think he'd be the quickest. I certainly think he'd be the quickest to adjust to the Bills system, and maybe right out the gate, get Buffalo going in a good direction there. I mean, but again, if they're going to be going to the Joe Brady playbook and relying more on the run and letting James cook, it may not matter who is in that spot. You know what I mean? As long as it's someone.
Looking at Michael Gallup, again, he was, according to the Dallas Cowboys website, he was on an explosive trajectory to start his career. And then he had an injury that kind of slowed him up here. Looking at Michael Gallup, he tore his ACL in 2021. He's not been able to come back and return to that explosive form that he had, but he is 6'1". He's never had more than, he had 1 year that had 1,100 yards. Since then, 843, 445, 424, and then 418 last season.
Yeah, so it's
kind of been phased out.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the types of guys, 28 years old, that the Buffalo Bills may take a shot on. Because again, looking at an Odell Beckham Jr., he's probably going to want to get paid handsomely, which the Buffalo Bills may not have a lot of money in that. We'll see how that works out. But one name I want to mention, absolutely not Michael Thomas. He's held together by rubber bands and bubble gum.
Right.
Good in his prime. He may work out for someone, but if you're if you're trying to say, hey, we're going to bring in Michael Thomas and yikes.
Yeah, now that would be a collective groan across the Bills Mafia that I think everybody probably would understand and comprehend.
Two big names, Cincinnati on the trade market. Cincinnati wide receiver T. Higgins, who reportedly wants to be dealt after being franchise tagged. Spotrac has him at a 4-year, $104 million contract extension. I can't imagine in any right world, John, that the Cincinnati Bengals would allow the Buffalo Bills to make a trade with them to get better than the Bengals.
No.
So the only other name really that's kind of logical that may, again, end up costing a lot, both in assets and in money. San Francisco wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, who's on a 1-year, $14 million deal right now. Spotrac has an extension for him at 4 by 96. Again, very young, talented wide receiver. Not sure Buffalo has the assets that they want to move to make a deal like that. But here's the thing to remember. In the draft, OSU wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., probably not a target, but LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors, wide receiver from Washington, Romeo Odunze, I believe is how you say his last name. And then LSU wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. among the big names to look for in the draft. But with the Buffalo Bills, with having, I believe it's 10 or 11 draft picks in this year's draft, there's a lot of assets to be moved potentially. Also looking at next year's 2025 first round pick potentially being on the table to move up to get a big name. I would have to guess, John, that the Bills are going to pick a wide receiver in the first round and in the second round, maybe even, because again, at this point, there's a lot of good talent in this year's draft.
Absolutely.
And if the Bills need one thing, it will be cost-controlled talent that can catch a football, because losing Gabe Davis to the Jacksonville Jaguars, which we'll talk about in another on a podcast, wrapping up the offseason, and losing Stefon Diggs, obviously, as we've talked about throughout this entire podcast, the Buffalo Bills, if I did my math correct, lost 152 receptions that have walked out the door at one Bills drive this offseason. So you've got to replace that somehow.
Yes, absolutely.
And Samuel can only do so much.
Right. And I get that, earlier in the podcast, I had mentioned that this is, the Buffalo Bills believing that Josh Allen can help elevate that. But when you break it down in that numbers, that's a lot of receptions. That's going to be missing. And not only just with those receptions too, you got to think of the amount of first downs that those two produced, the amount of touchdowns that those two produced. That's a lot of that. So to be able to, I think going into this season, expecting the kind of established numbers that, Diggs and Davis help provide probably is an unrealistic expectation. But then again, that's where the genius, if there is any, of Joe Brady and his offense is going to come into play. And I really think that for all the Josh Allen, we're going to keep hearing, I really think that the heart and soul of that offense is going to run through the legs of James Cook. I think that it's real that the whole game plan and the whole development of the receiving core, this young receiving core, is going to be conducive and dependent on how much or how little that the running back is used in a running situation or even in a dink and dunk pass situation kind of thing, incorporating the tailback there. That's really going to be what I'm going to be laser focused on, to see how well these adjustments of this, loss in receptions, first downs, touchdowns from those two guys. It's going to be very interesting to see it play out.
I mean, John, it's April 5th. It's the evening of April 5th. We're sitting here talking about Stefon Diggs being traded. And so I'm going to sit here and preface with that. But I think that this move shows that the Bills have always been all in on Josh Allen. So that's a big no-brainer right there. Obviously, great call, idiot.
Yeah.
I think this shows that the Buffalo Bills are all in on the development of Dalton Kincaid. Thank you.
Yep.
Again, great job.
He's
idiot.
a hoss.
They are the comparisons to Travis Kelce may be a little unfair for him, but that seems to be how they want to develop and utilize Dalton Kincaid in the offense. Obviously, again, John, you mentioned James Cook. I think they're all in on James Cook.
Don't forget him.
Guys like Khalil Shakir, again, who had a breakout second half of the season, whether that was because they were avoiding throwing to Stefon Diggs remains to be seen. But again, you can see the talent there that the Buffalo Bills have, and they have to work to unlock because, again, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Joe Brady. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Sean McDermott as well. But again, crystal ball, if the Bills take a step back, it may not be the worst thing in the world because, again, 2025 is going to be a year where they can take a big leap forward. But hopefully you would hope that by 2025, when they have that cap room, they can go, hey, either, I don't want to, get too ahead of myself, but hey, either, they're the defending Super Bowl champions and they don't really have to improve much and they have all this money, great thing, or they don't make it there and they go, okay, what do we have to improve to get there? Well, our offense is good. Let's go, our wide receivers are set or whatever. Now let's go do something else. You would hope that would be the case because obviously with Curtis Samuel, with Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, they have gone on and picked up a few other guys, but we all know that those names are probably special teamers, so you don't want to get too crazy with that. But again,
Indeed,
the draft will be fun. The lead up to the draft will be fun. If obviously anything big happens, you'll hear from us. We'll be talking TL really soon. I mean, obviously, under the circuit, we're glad to talk to you. We're glad you're listening, considering the circumstances and everything. But John, I want to say, as always, thank you for taking the time. Thank you to everybody for tuning back in. For John Cimino, I am Ryan Wolfe. As always, we are Trust the Podcast.
You're not.
We'll catch you sometime very soon here in the future, talking about the Buffalo Bills. Again, Stefon Diggs traded to the Houston Texans. Not all has been lost at one Bills drive, but people are clamoring for what is next. As always, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and go Bills.
Ciao, ciao. Boomer, take it away.
No one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.